Last month, I was standing outside a community center in a quiet suburb of Tokyo, watching the annual Coming-of-Age Day celebrations. There was this one young woman in a stunning, deep red furosode kimono, her hair pinned up with intricate silk flowers, looking like a vibrant spark of life against the gray concrete. She was laughing, taking a selfie with two friends, but as I panned my eyes across the plaza, the silence was what actually hit me. The Grand Hall, built decades ago to accommodate thousands of graduates, felt like a cavernous, half-empty shell. I turned to an older man standing nearby, a retired local official who had seen 40 of these ceremonies, and I mentioned how unfortunate it was to see so few young people. I expected him to nod somberly or launch into a lecture about the demographic time bomb we always hear about in Western headlines. Instead, he just took a slow sip of canned coffee and gave me a small, unsettlingly calm smile. "It's not unfortunate," he said. "It's exactly as scheduled." He didn't talk about economic data or the crisis of a shrinking workforce. Instead, he pointed toward a small, unmanned delivery robot humming efficiently past us on the sidewalk, and then toward a row of micro-mansions. Tiny, perfectly organized apartments designed for one. To him, those three girls in their kimonos weren't a sign of a dying nation. They were the 0.89%, the precisely calculated remainder of a civilization that has decided it would rather shrink into a masterpiece of order than grow into a landscape of chaos. That conversation left me stunned. It forced me to realize that while the rest of the world looks at Japan and sees a tragedy of aging and decline, Japan might actually be the only nation on Earth following a deliberate script. They aren't failing to solve the problem. They've made a cold sociological choice. They're betting that cultural purity, high-tech automation, and absolute social stability are worth more than a rising GDP. They're choosing a graceful decay over the friction of the modern world. And looking at that quiet, spotless, perfectly functioning street, I started to ask the question, what if the collapse is actually their greatest success?
And that phrase right there, exactly as scheduled, that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's profound.
It is. It changes the entire frame.
Absolutely, because it means we're not looking at a failure, we're looking at a plan. And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We need to unpack the blueprint for what is, a radical national experiment.
It's a sovereign bet, right?
It's a sovereign bet on their own cultural integrity, on technological depth, over what the rest of us see as the absolute necessity of growth. So to really get it, we have to start with the structural certainty of the crisis they face, and then look at the tools, institutional, cultural, technological, they're using to manage it.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's unpack that blueprint, beginning with just the sheer, undeniable scale of this crisis. Yeah. Because when you look at the numbers, you understand why a radical choice like elegant shrinkage even becomes an option.
Right, the context is everything, and the data here is, well, it's acute. It's unlike anywhere else in the G7. Japan is, statistically, the oldest G7 country. Full stop.
And what does that mean in real numbers?
It means right now, today, over a quarter of the entire population is over 65 years old.
1 in 4 people.
1 in 4 people you see on the street. And the projections, well, that's where it becomes a structural certainty, not just a trend.
Because it's accelerating.
It's accelerating dramatically. Projections suggest the population is on track to drop by 20 million people by 2045.
20 million? That's the population of a pretty significant country.
It's like we're moving a major European nation from their map in just, 2 decades. This isn't a dip, it's a massive structural contraction.
And while the overall population shrinks, the proportion of retirees is just skyrocketing.
Exactly. By that same year, 2045, over 1/3, more than 33% of everyone in the country will be over 65. The basic engine for replacement is just broken.
The fertility rate.
The total fertility rate, the TFR. It's been stuck for decades. In 2020, it was just 1.34. And you need 2.1 just to, keep the population stable.
So the shrinkage is already baked in for the next 50 years at least.
It's a mathematical guarantee. And that reality creates these two massive cascading problems. First, the fiscal strain on the state, and second, this immediate critical labor vacuum.
Let's talk about the fiscal strain, because it's rooted in something that's actually a huge success story, right?
It is. It's the paradox of longevity. The Japanese have an incredible 82-year average life expectancy, one of the highest in the world.
Which is a testament to their society, their healthcare.
Absolutely. But economically, that success puts enormous pressure on funding, welfare, healthcare, all those post-retirement services for a population that's living longer and longer.
So you have fewer working people supporting a much larger and older retired population.
For much longer. The math just stops working under a traditional growth model.
And then there's the labor vacuum. This isn't a future problem. It's happening right now.
Right now. And it's hitting the sectors that keep the country running. Construction, agriculture, and especially care services, which is sort of ironically strained by the very population it needs to serve.
It's not just blue-collar jobs, though, is it?
Not at all. The shortage is hitting high-skilled sectors just as hard. The government itself projects a shortfall of nearly 800,000 IT professionals by 2030.
800,000. And that's a huge problem if your entire solution is based on technology.
It's a massive vulnerability. You need the people who can build and maintain the robots that are supposed to be replacing the people.
Okay, so that crisis connects to this other almost paradoxical part of Japan's situation. It's finances. The debt.
Right, because the demographic squeeze makes an already extreme financial position even worse. Japan has, by far, the highest public debt in the world.
What's the number?
The debt-to-GDP ratio is just over 250%.
Whoa!
Yeah. To give you some perspective, the U.S. is around 125%, and people consider that a major challenge. Japan's is double that. They've borrowed 2.5 times the size of their entire national economy.
Okay, so how? How is that even possible? In any other country, that would trigger a massive financial crisis, skyrocketing interest rates, maybe even a default. How do they keep the lights on?
The key is who owns the debt. It's almost all held domestically.
By Japanese institutions, Japanese citizens?
Exactly. Japanese banks, pension funds, regular people. So the money basically stays within their own system. They don't have to worry about international capital suddenly fleeing and collapsing their currency.
So they're basically relying on their own social cohesion, on that shared trust to keep the system stable.
They are. It's a kind of cultural buffer against an economic reality that would be catastrophic anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that's why this idea of elegant shrinkage is so important to them. It's about preserving that social order that underpins everything, including their financial stability.
Okay, so we have this massive problem. Shrinking population, a labor vacuum, huge debt. The default solution for any other developed nation would be obvious.
Mass immigration.
Right, it's the global default setting. But Japan has offered this grand refusal. Why? Where does this deep-seated resistance come from?
You really have to look at their institutional DNA. I mean, compare them to the U.S. or Germany. Those countries have generations of experience managing large foreign populations, often from guest worker programs after the war. They have the whole institutional infrastructure for it.
And Japan just doesn't.
They never built it. They solved their post-war labor needs almost entirely internally through discipline, high productivity technology. So they never developed that, institutional muscle memory for it.
But the aversion seems deeper than just institutional gaps. It feels cultural, historical.
Oh, absolutely. It's cemented in history. You can trace it all the way back to the Edo period.
The Sakoku policy.
The Sakoku, or closed country policy, from 1603 to 1868. That's 265 years of forced isolation.
265 years. That's longer than the entire history of the United States.
Exactly. I mean, think about the kind of cultural and institutional muscle memory that creates. It baked in this deep belief that foreign contact brings risk, contamination, disorder.
So homogeneity equals stability. That became the core of the national identity.
It became the default setting. And it gives modern politicians this confidence to reject what they see as the messy solution of foreign hands. They can point to their post-war recovery and say, we did this ourselves with our own discipline. It's a powerful political narrative.
But even with that deep resistance, the crisis got so bad that they had to do something, right? The policy couldn't just stand still forever.
No, and it didn't. But the shifts were incredibly cautious and, reluctant. For decades, you had these intense debates. Around 1970, 1990, 2005, the business community would argue for growth, for more workers.
And the politicians would argue for security and cultural identity.
And for decades, the security and identity arguments won. The door for lower qualified workers stayed firmly shut.
Until 2018. The sources call that the dam break. What happened?
The 2018 reform was the big one. It introduced new visa categories and a quota system for lower qualified workers, and they rushed it through in less than a year.
So what changed? Why then?
It was a perfect storm, really. The labor shortage had become so severe it was undeniable, and you had a very centralized government under Prime Minister Abe that could push things through.
So this wasn't some sudden embrace of multiculturalism?
Not at all. The Abe administration was described as a group of reluctant policy entrepreneurs. Their hand was forced. They were basically out of other options.
And that reluctance shows in the policy itself, right?
Absolutely. The reform was almost entirely about admission policy, just getting bodies in the door. There was very little focus on integration.
I remember reading that the funding for immigration control was still way higher than the funding for integration.
Vastly outweighed it, and that tells you everything you need to know. The goal was to solve a labor shortage while minimizing the cultural impact. It's a plug-and-play approach, not a social project.
And that cautious mindset continues, even as they're letting more people in.
It does. They've expanded the industries where people can stay longer, transportation, forestry, and they're doubling the entry cap to over 800,000 by 2028. But these are all cabinet-level decisions, often bypassing big public debates. It's all very controlled, very managed to make sure foreign workers fill gaps without, change the fundamental social fabric.
Okay, so the government is trying this very cautious, controlled immigration, but it's not solving the root problem of why the population is shrinking in the first place. And that brings us to this fascinating idea of the rational strike. Why are Japanese youth, especially women, actively choosing not to have kids?
This is where you see this huge societal contradiction. I mean, you have these very conservative gender roles where women are expected to be wives and mothers. Normally, that correlates with high birth rates.
But not in Japan.
In Japan, the rate is critically low. And that's because there's this impossible conflict between those traditional expectations and the reality of modern urban life.
Let's start with the reason that comes up the most, especially online. Money.
Money is the #1 barrier. The financial strain of raising a child in Japan is just exceptionally high. We're not just talking about food and clothes. We're talking about mandatory kindergarten, expensive cram schools, juku private tutors, and then the crushing cost of university.
So it's not just about affording a child, it's about affording them a chance to succeed in this super competitive society.
Precisely. On forums, you see it over and over again. People say money is a big hindrance, a constant worry. And you have to remember, for most women, having a child means quitting their job.
Because there's no childcare support.
Exactly. So the family suddenly drops to a single income, which puts this unbelievable financial pressure on the household.
And that economic pressure is piled on top of a work culture that's already hostile to family life.
The salaryman culture. It's infamous for a reason. Men are expected to work these insane hours, often until 10 p.m. or later. That makes it incredibly difficult to even find a partner, let alone share the work of raising a family.
For women, it's basically impossible to combine a career and a family.
It is. The long, inflexible hours just don't work without massive subsidized childcare, which doesn't exist on the scale needed.
Which leads to what some women call the double evil. What do they mean by that?
It's this painful dilemma they face. A forced choice between two bad outcomes.
Okay.
Option 1, you have a child. You're then basically forced to resign. You lose your career, you lose your independent income, and you become a full-time housewife. Option 2, you stay in the workforce. But that means giving up on having a family because bosses will just assume you're going to get pregnant and pass you over for promotions.
It's a total no-win scenario.
A no-win scenario that punishes women no matter what they choose.
And even for the women who try to do both, who work and have kids, the burden at home is still unequal.
Hugely. The woman still shoulders the lion's share of childcare and housework. It's a crazy double standard. A father gets praised like a hero for changing a diaper, but a mother is just expected to know how to be a good mother naturally. There's no praise, just expectation. So when you're faced with all that, choosing not to have children, it starts to look less like a failure and more like a rational strike against an impossible system.
And you can really see this conflict playing out in the public discourse, especially online.
Oh, yeah. You see two completely opposing narratives. On one side, you have the modern discourse. This frames being childless as a positive, rational choice. It's about freedom, self-realization.
People saying things like, I want to live my life being me.
Exactly. Or focusing on the couple's relationship, saying they're afraid a child would destroy the couple's affection. One person even claimed that childless people are evolving.
Evolving, wow. But then you have the complete opposite reaction from the establishment.
The traditional discourse. This is the intense social pressure, the state ideology. And here, childless people are attacked. They're called selfish, ignorant, immature, a burden on society.
And this isn't just internet trolls, right? Politicians have said things like this.
Absolutely. They've used terms like parasites, unpatriotic. There was an infamous case of a politician calling women birth-giving machines. This view sees having children not as a choice, but as a patriotic duty.
So you make this rational choice for your present, but then you have to face the future. In a country with the longest life expectancy in the world, what happens when you're old and you don't have that traditional family safety net?
And that's where you see the deep anxiety. It's the ultimate trade-off. People express this profound fear of being left alone. We saw accounts of women writing things like, "I absolutely want to die before my husband, as I will probably be lonely otherwise."
That's heartbreaking.
It is. It shows that even though the choice is rational now, the social contract for the elderly is strained, and they know it. It's an unresolved societal fear.
So the government is resistant to immigration. The youth are opting out of having kids. That leaves one massive strategic option left on the table: mechanical isolation, the grand bet on technology.
This is it. This is the core of the elegant shrinkage strategy. Japan is looking at AI and automation as the direct, clean, and crucially, the culturally acceptable replacement for foreign workers.
It's an ideological choice, not just an economic one.
Completely. Automation is being used as a literal moral barrier, a way to protect the Japanese social order, that sense of cultural stillness they call ma, from what they perceive as the noise and friction of mass immigration.
That anecdote you shared about Mrs. Sato and her robotic arm really drove that home for me. She preferred the machine because it was predictable.
It was predictable. It didn't bring different customs or, as she said, unfamiliar smells into her private space. A robot is culturally null. It does the job without any social friction.
And the economic bet they're making on this is huge.
Staggering. AI is being pitched as the key to their next economic chapter. They're projecting it could unlock over 100 trillion yen.
Which is what, about 650 billion US dollars?
Roughly. And that massive productivity gain is explicitly designed to compensate for the shrinking workforce. It's a calculated strategy for civilizational survival on their own terms.
So where are they deploying this technology most strategically?
Well, historically, they've always been a leader in industrial robotics, in manufacturing, cars, electronics. And what's interesting there is that a study found that cheaper robots actually led to more employment in that sector.
More? How does that work?
The scale effect outweighed the substitution effect. Basically, the robots made the companies so much more productive and competitive that they grew and hired more humans to manage the expansion.
But the real labor crisis now is in the service sector, not factories.
And that's where they're aggressively expanding automation now. In the care sector, for example, you see robotic exoskeletons that help workers lift elderly patients without getting injured.
Right, so the tech supports the human worker, makes their job sustainable.
Exactly. Or you have companion bots like Puro, the little therapeutic robotic seal that provides comfort in care homes. In agriculture, you have automated hydroponics and robotic arms managing crops because the farming population is so old.
And this gets to the core of the mechanical isolation idea. There's a direct inverse relationship between adopting robots and accepting migrants.
Precisely. The research is clear. They act as substitutes. Regions with more low-skilled migrant workers adopt fewer robots. Regions with severe labor shortages but a resistance to immigration. They go all in on the robots.
So it's a literal choice, a robot or a person who needs to be integrated into society.
It's the clean, high-tech solution that avoids all that messy social friction. It's the ultimate expression of their strategy.
Okay, so we've laid out the crisis, the cultural resistance, and the massive tech bet. But now we have to look at the other side of the coin. What does this relentless focus on high social order and homogeneity actually cost?
Right, because this defense of a pure, high-trust society is framed as the key to stability. And the prime example they always use is having the safest streets on Earth. It's a huge point of national pride.
But the sources we looked at suggest we need to scrutinize that narrative.
We do, because those low official crime stats might be influenced by some pretty serious systemic issues in reporting, which could be masking the reality of certain crimes.
What kind of systemic issues?
There's a lot of qualitative evidence pointing to massive underreporting of crimes like rape, domestic abuse, and child abuse. Part of it is cultural, this pressure to maintain surface harmony, the tape may. But a lot of it is institutional.
What do you mean?
Well, for victims of sexual assault, the process of reporting can be re-traumatizing. They're often subjected to accusatory questioning, held for hours, sometimes even encouraged by police not to file a report at all.
So the system itself creates a disincentive to report, which then creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of low crime stats.
It does. It reinforces the official numbers, which then validates the political narrative of exceptional safety. And it's not just speculation. There was a huge scandal in Osaka where police admitted to failing to report 81,000 crimes over a 4-year period.
81,000.
Yeah, which suggests there's real institutional pressure to keep the numbers looking good.
Okay, so there are hidden social costs. What about economic costs? This intense inward focus can't be good for global competitiveness. This is the Galapagos effect.
Galapagos effect, exactly. It's a great term. It describes this isolated, hyper-domestic development. You create these incredible, highly specialized products for your own market.
That are completely useless abroad,
Right.
like Darwin's finches.
Precisely. They thrive in isolation, but can't compete in the global ecosystem.
And you can feel this as a visitor, can't you? It creates real-world friction.
You absolutely can. I mean, think about something as basic as getting cash. The vast majority of Japan's 190,000 ATMs simply do not accept foreign bank cards.
Right, you have to hunt for a post office or a 7-Eleven.
It's this constant little reminder that the infrastructure is built for them, first and foremost. Internal function over external access.
And the key car is the ultimate example of this in industry.
Perfect example. These tiny little cars with engines under 660 cc, they get huge tax breaks, so they're incredibly popular in Japan's narrow city streets. They're perfectly optimized for the domestic market.
But they have zero export value.
Virtually none. So manufacturers pour all this investment into a protected domestic niche, which limits their ability to compete globally. It's a clear economic trade-off they're willing to make.
So we've talked about the top-down strategy, but the depopulation is really changing the country from the ground up, isn't it? Especially in rural areas.
Oh, it's hitting everywhere now. Even cities are shrinking. But you see it most starkly in the countryside. You have these collapsing communities, the Genkai Shiraku, where more than half the people are over 65. Empty houses, IKEA, are everywhere.
It sounds totally catastrophic, but you're saying this has actually spurred a new kind of local movement.
It has. A movement of new localism. It's a rejection of that old, top-down, growth-at-all-costs model from the 20th century. Instead, these regions are focused on something they call the depopulation dividend.
A dividend? That sounds positive. How can you get a dividend from shrinking?
The idea is that you can achieve positive gains from controlled shrinkage. Better quality of life, more sustainability. You stop measuring success by growth and start measuring it qualitatively.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
Sato Island in Niigata is a great case study. The local government just accepted that growth was impossible, so they shifted their entire focus to making Sato Asumiasui Tokoro a comfortable living space.
So what did they do?
3 main things. First, they turned environmental conservation into an economic driver. They focused on saving the toki, the Japanese crested ibis, which only lives on Sato. This commitment to biodiversity and sustainable agriculture got them global recognition from the UN.
So they're leaning into what makes them unique, not trying to be something they're not.
Exactly. Second, they focused on keeping their young people. They created local vocational courses in elderly care and traditional crafts, so kids wouldn't have to leave the island for school. It was a direct counter to the brain drain to Tokyo.
Smart. And the third thing?
They developed global cultural exports rooted in their local heritage. Sato is home to the world-famous Kodo Taiko drummers. They host international triathlons. And they developed this very specialized sake that one local brewer now supplies to the high-end Nobu restaurant chain worldwide.
So they're proving that you can redefine success. It doesn't have to be about getting bigger.
It could be about getting better, more sustainable, more unique. It shows that shrinkage can, in fact, yield a dividend.
This whole deep dive has really shown a civilization trying to navigate these truly opposing forces. They're making choices that just fundamentally contradict the Western and really the global model of perpetual growth.
It's a profound socioeconomic experiment. I mean, at its core, Japan's choice is to deliberately prioritize its cultural integrity and this kind of predictable, quiet order, the map over the social friction that comes with the liberal growth model.
And they execute that strategy through a combination of resisting mass migration and going all in on this idea of mechanical isolation.
Right, and even the technology they choose is governed by this cultural expectation of social harmony over pure efficiency. It all converges, their history, their culture, their technology, into this strategy of elegant shrinkage.
They're essentially accepting a smaller economic future to protect what they see as their national soul.
They are. They're demonstrating that maybe for some nations, success in the 21st century isn't about getting bigger. It can be about the quiet, orderly maintenance of a unique identity, even if that means a smaller future. It's really a bold defiance of a global status quo that measures greatness only by expansion.
The gamble Japan is making is that civilizational success can be measured not by the size of the population or the rate of GDP expansion, but by the disciplined depth of its enduring social order. It's a powerful, quiet statement against the pressure for mandatory diversity and endless economic growth.